quote that stood out in the article was the hardest part isn't making the product anymore, it's making people care. And that was Sam Altman. And then there's a line there that says, we're living in an era of permissionless creation, but gatekept attention. And I think that is the crux and the challenge for any startup, any existing business, is figuring out this new world. And I think that is our goal with the kind of whole buyer-centric approach, as well as the omniscient buyer, is really understanding who you're selling to.
Welcome to the Omniscient Buyer Show, where AI, trust, and buyer behavior collide. Hosted by Halko and Tony Zayas, this show explores how modern buyers are using AI to research faster, verify claims instantly, and demand radical transparency from sales and marketing teams. If your buyers already know more than your sellers, you're in the right place.
All right, so today we're going to pivot a little bit, and Andy, you shared a quote that pulled something from an article that you saw recently from Sam Altman that really is interesting. It kind of shows the pivot that's on the horizon and where we're at with the omniscient buyer, with tech in general. Tell us what was in the article.
Yeah, he was doing a Q&A, and someone was asking, okay, in a world where anyone can build an app and startups can come up overnight with really impactful software, what does that mean for the market, right? And he really said the hardest part now isn't making the product, it's making people care. And I totally agree with that. I really like that quote because I agree. I mean, yes, the market is going to be flooded, but that doesn't mean that people still don't have a need for things to improve their lives, solve their problems, interact with. It's just the question of who is going to see it, and is what you're creating something they care about, right? And so I think he's almost saying, one, for folks out there that are just creating apps, if you're not stepping back and saying, this is something someone will actually care about, that's a problem. You have to, evaluate demand. But then also the other side is you have to have a better plan for figuring out how to get people to care about your product over what else is out there in the marketplace.
Right. I mean, that becomes the crux. And I'll just share it's timely because the state of the world, A, but B, yesterday we had an internal project we were managing on a spreadsheet. And I said, well, let me try something out. And I basically took our discussion and prompted Manus to build out a project management system specific to kind of what we needed and all that. But it was $17 in AI credits. And we had full production project management. So and I'm not a software developer, right? So I think that idea for me is hearing that is totally dead on. But the challenge becomes,
and it's interesting that you say that because later on in the article, he talked about how, the strategy is going to be much more of software for individuals, where AI, what it really does, instead of having a CRM with 100 different fields that can be filled in, right, AI creates the interface and the fields and the pieces that you work best with, not even your team, you. Right. And so I think to that point is that doesn't mean CRMs aren't valuable anymore. And it doesn't mean that we're going to create a CRM off the fly every single time or a different one for everyone in our office. Right. But what it does mean is that a great CRM will adapt in real time to the person using it so that it becomes much more valuable and powerful. So I think what, you just talked about really is interesting to more of what he was saying about how this world is going to change.
And the CRM example is great because I think of salespeople. Most people typically hate their CRM. Doesn't matter what they're on, doesn't matter what they were on, what they moved to, they hate it. And the reason for it is because everyone's forced to use it in a certain way, the way that it is built, right? So the way the developer built it to use. And the point here of like that personalization, individual customization kind of being on the horizon is wild.
Well, and I'll just add another kind of interesting side to it is our conversation that we had about our own internal like spreadsheet that we were using and all of that. The interesting insight that I actually had after we discussed it, after you created what you did, is that there's really actually a whole piece of how we all best interpret information. Like for our developer, he enjoyed the spreadsheet and the way that it worked, right? And he really understood it. He defended it. And then we went to the client and, we had been giving him like, here's access to our teamwork system. Here's a spreadsheet. Here's this. And he kept coming back and referencing, here's a Word doc that I created. Because in his mind, that was what like he could understand and how he felt comfortable. For me, it was going into Figma and breaking things up and saying, I want a screenshot here and I want to see these pieces. And then for you went off and you created a system that tried to combine some elements from those. But the ironic thing is whatever you create still is something that we tried to create for everybody. And my insight at the end is we all are just different. Like I get understanding from seeing things visually laid out. The developer gets understanding from a list and kind of structural clarity. The client needs narrative and wants to see this as something where, it flows in an order that he can really just like look at, and it has some of the nuance, right? And so all of us have this disconnect no matter what we do. And I think for the last X number of years, there's always this forcing everybody into the view that is available that we need to share. And it's created disruption. And we're in an interesting space with AI where since our brains work a little bit differently, now so can the systems that we interact with.
Right. And that used to be the hard part, was the product side, the tech side.
Well, you couldn't, I look at our project management system and it's got 30 different views. They build it out in a way that you could see it in timeline view. You could see a task list. You could see it as a table. You could see it as, a Kanban. And it's like, oh my God, this company had to build 30 different interfaces. And then that just adds more confusion to the product because it's like, well, which one do we use? And then you go in, you say, I love table view. And all of a sudden you're forcing other people on your team to use table view when that wasn't what was best for their mindset.
Right.
So product side, they're spending so many hours trying to develop all these views to satisfy so many different people. And internally, everybody's trying to get on the same page. And I just think now there's a way to maybe solve all that moving forward. I mean, we're not there yet even, but we are on the precipice of being. But I think, the thing that stood out to me about this quote and how it connects to what we do is really this idea too of not only is it making people care, but also realizing that those people are different. We've been talking about in the Omniscient Buyer about how our audiences are changing, that instead of researching, they want answers instantly because they don't want to go out to Google, click 50 links. They just want to ask a question and get a specific answer. The software piece is the same. They don't want to go in and choose from 30 views. They want to go in and say, this is how I want to see it. And it just shows up that way. And it's really about this idea that whether you're in marketing, you're in sales, you're in product development, your audience is no longer the people that they used to be. Their expectations are changing. The way they want to work is changing. And so if we build, we market, we sell to the same people that we've been dealing with the last 20 or 30 years, we're going to be, met with issues and challenges. And so we don't even just have to change what we're doing. We have to realize that those people are different. And we need to rethink how we interact with them and what we create for them moving forward.
Right. And the quote that stood out in the article was, the hardest part isn't making the product anymore, it's making people care. And that was Sam Altman. And then there's a line there that says, we're living in an era of permissionless creation, but gatekept attention. And I think that is the crux and the challenge for any startup, any existing business, is figuring out this new world. And I think that is our goal with the kind of whole buyer-centric approach, as well as the omniscient buyer, is really understanding who you're selling to. Now, there's going to be personalization on every single individual, but understanding more about that ICP, the personas, and going a lot deeper is what we've really kind of worked to focus on. How do we now knowing kind of where things are going, knowing that product isn't the tough part anymore, kind of what is next? How do we step into this new reality?
I mean, it comes down to the foundation of what you and I are all about, and what we have been, I think, just obsessing about lately is understanding audience.
Right.
If it is about what do people care about, it is about getting through the gatekeeping of their attention. It's about creating products that, actually solve their issues the way that they want, instead of forcing them into the way we think they want it. All of that comes down to one simple truth: understanding those people better than anyone else. So there may be 50 people creating the same product as you, offering the same service as you. The barrier is gone. There's now 1,000 people doing it. But if you want to have a distinct advantage, that advantage is knowing the people that you are trying to sell it to build it for, better than those other 1,000. And that's the differentiator. That's the unique advantage. That's the moat, is having that deep understanding of their psychology and how they work and their motivations and what their preferences are. That's how you get them to care. That's how you get them to use, and that's how you get them to spend their dollars. And
Right.
So I think, great, everybody can create a product, but it is going to be the folks that understand the buyer that they're targeting better than anybody else that are going to beat those 1,000 other products.
And knowing isn't enough. It's not enough just to know your audience. We rolled out the buyer alignment score inside of Buyer Twin. And I think that is kind of that actionable piece where we're helping people rapidly understand their audience, the people that they're selling to, but then also aligning, because so the score is basically an alignment of that person, their needs, their challenges, their motivations, their buying factors, all those things, but then what you're offering as a business and how that matches up. Because only when you kind of marry those two things can you properly articulate so people understand that you're the right fit versus competitors. So product's not enough, and understanding the audience is the fundamental starting point. But then I think we have to go think differently about how we communicate and, pitch. How do we articulate? How do we message?
Yeah, I'm actually writing an article about this right now. Is the difference between reporting, insight, and, decision making. And reporting is like, we see users do X.
Yeah.
Insight is they're doing X because of Y. And then, decision is because Y, we are going to do Z. And I know I just threw a bunch of letters out there, so maybe that's completely meaningless. But that difference between we're just getting, a report of what's happening versus we're seeing
Right.
what the root cause is. And then when we make a decision, we're making the decision to solve the root cause.
Right.
It's really what it's about.
Right. It's going deeper and understanding kind of implications and what that means. No, really good stuff. I will mention again, Buyer Twin, we rolled that out. If you guys have not looked at our product, buyertwin.com, check it out. Anything else to wrap up here today? I can't wait to dive in. I know you shared the screenshot of that article, but I want to read the whole thing. We'll probably link to it when we publish this recording, but a new world out there for sure. And changes are certainly happening rapidly.
Agreed. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to the Omniscient Buyer Show. If this episode challenged how you think about buyers, sales, or AI, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. For deeper insights on AI-powered buyer behavior, answer engine optimization, and modern go-to-market strategy, visit insivia.com.